The private dining room crackled with a certain tension. A man famous for his ruthless control was holding court, sizing up 3 seemingly perfect women. Each one was a candidate to be the new stepmother to his 6-year-old daughter. Champagne flowed freely. The clinking of gold cutlery echoed in the silence. Then, without warning, the little girl broke free from the watchful eye of her bodyguard. She dodged past the plush red carpet, rushed past the meticulously presented candidates, and buried her face in the flour-dusted fabric of my apron. An absolute silence descended upon the room. Her father turned, his gaze locking onto mine. He was the kind of man who was simply not accustomed to hearing the word no. Chicago is, in reality, 2 distinct cities. There's the one where I earn my living, and there's the one where I sleep. The one that pays my bills is all shimmering glass towers and upscale restaurants like Cento, where a single bottle of wine can easily cost more than my monthly rent. The one where I sleep is nestled down by the river, where the ever-present fog carries the scent of damp concrete and the shadows seem to hold their breath, waiting. My name is Rowan Hale. I'm 26 years old. I used to be a nursing student, brimming with naive hope for the future. But hope, unfortunately, doesn't cover the exorbitant costs of chemotherapy. My mother is gone now, leaving behind a mountain of medical debt. A final, suffocating inheritance I can't seem to escape. Now, I work double shifts at Cento doing whatever needs to be done. I'm a waitress, a prep cook, anything they ask of me. I'm good with my hands, and I'm especially good at blending into the background, staying invisible. Tonight, however, invisibility was not an option. The atmosphere inside the restaurant was palpable, almost suffocating. Marco, the owner, had been a bundle of nerves all day. He kept wiping his brow, obsessively checking the reservation book, and barking orders at the kitchen staff, especially those working in the private wing. Section 4 had been reserved for a single party, a group of 5. Matteo Lucero. You didn't need to follow society gossip to recognize his name, but you definitely needed to read the shipping manifests. He was 38 years old and owned Lucero Logistics. He owned the ports, the trucks, the warehouses, the entire network. He was legitimate for the most part. The rumors suggested that the mostly was what truly made him powerful. He was a widower, and tonight he was bringing his daughter. I watched them arrive through the narrow service door slit, a procession of black SUVs, sleek and silent as sharks gliding through water. Matteo Lucero emerged first. He was wearing a suit that probably cost upwards of $10,000, but he wore it like a suit of armor. He was tall, dark-haired, and moved with a precise efficiency that wasted no energy. He was followed by 3 women. They were, in a single word, perfect. One was a blonde, practically dripping in diamonds. One was dark-haired, carrying a briefcase, her gaze sharp and calculating. The third was elegant, her smile warm and inviting. They were the candidates, each vying for the position of wife and mother. Last, a guard carefully lifted out the child Isa Lucero. She was 6 years old, a ghost-like figure in a blue velvet dress. Her hair was as dark as her father's. She clutched a worn, stuffed fox, a beloved toy with a missing ear and one solitary button eye. She looked impossibly small and vulnerable against the backdrop of armed men and polished marble. The whole setup was obscene. A blind date, a corporate merger of sorts, all for the position of wife and mother. I felt a surge of disgust rising within me, but I quickly smothered it. Disgust doesn't pay the interest on my crippling loans. My job tonight was simple. Serve Section 4. Keep my head down. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact. For the first hour I was a ghost. I poured champagne, those golden bubbles for the golden women. I cleared appetizer plates with practiced ease. I navigated around the imposing, silent guards who were posted along the walls like sentinels. The conversation was strained, awkward. The women directed their practiced charm at Matteo, offering polite inquiries to Isla. Isa just stared blankly at her plate, clutching the fox tightly in her lap, hidden beneath the table. When a siren wailed in the distance, echoing through the city, the little girl flinched visibly. It was a full-body reaction, sharp and painful. I recognized it instantly. It was the sound of panic, the sound of loss, the sound of ambulances arriving far too late. Her father placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, but he didn't even look at her. He was too busy assessing the woman with the briefcase, calculating her value. I returned with the main course, carefully balancing 3 plates on my arm. My apron felt damp against my skin. I knew I had a small smudge of flour on my cheek from my time prepping dough in the kitchen. Isa was intently watching the candidates. The blonde woman leaned in, flashing a bright, artificial smile. "You are just adorable," the woman said, her voice high and tinkling like wind chimes. "We should go shopping for ponies." Isa abruptly pushed her chair back. It all happened so quickly. She didn't scream, didn't make a sound. She just moved. She slipped from her chair like water flowing downhill. A guard, a man built like a refrigerator, lunged to intercept her, but he was too slow. She ran. She ran past the blonde woman with the ponies. She ran past the sharp lawyer with the briefcase. She ran past the elegant socialite with the warm smile. She ran across the antique Persian rug, a small blue blur against the ornate patterns. And then she slammed directly into my legs. I stumbled, the plates rattling precariously. I managed to regain my balance, but I couldn't move. Her small arms were wrapped tightly around my waist, clinging to me with a desperate strength that belied her age. Her face was buried in the rough cotton of my apron. The world seemed to stop. The only sound was the quiet hum of the ventilation system. Marco, standing anxiously by the service door, went pale as a ghost. The 3 women stared, their perfect smiles frozen into masks of confusion and offense. The guards had their hands inside their jackets, ready to react. I heard a tiny, muffled sound, a sob escaping from her. Then she spoke, her voice thin and fragile, but cutting through the silence like a knife. "I want her." I stood there, a human shield made of cheap fabric. I could feel Matteo Lucero's eyes on me, burning into me. I didn't dare look up. I could feel the heat radiating off him, the barely suppressed anger, the confusion. He slowly rose to his feet. I heard the scrape of his chair against the polished wood floor. He was a man who was not accustomed to hearing the word no. He was a man who controlled the docks, the unions, the trucks, the flow of goods. He was a man rumored to make problems disappear without a trace. And his daughter, his silent, broken child, was clinging to a waitress, to me. He walked slowly toward us, each step heavy and measured. He stopped just feet away. I still looked down at the top of Essay's dark head, her hair soft against my apron. "Essay," he commanded, his voice deep and rough. "Come here." The little girl just trembled and held me even tighter. He looked at me then. His eyes were not just cold. They were assessing, calculating, dangerous. He was weighing his options, deciding if I was a mere nuisance or a potential threat. But as he looked at me, something in his expression momentarily cracked. He saw. I don't know what he saw. Not a threat, not an opportunist, just a 26-year-old woman in an apron holding a tray. He saw my stillness, my hesitation. I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there like a deer caught in headlights. My training, the nursing instincts I thought I had long buried, took over. I carefully, slowly, placed the heavy plates on a nearby service stand. My hands were steady, surprisingly calm. I ignored Matteo Lucero. I ignored the ever-watchful guards. I focused all my attention on the child. I bent my knees, wincing slightly at the ache in my muscles from the long shift, and knelt until I was eye level with her, even as she stubbornly hid her face in my apron. "Hello?" I said, my voice low and soft, the way I used to speak to my mother when the pain was particularly bad. "My name is Rowan." She didn't move, just kept her face pressed into the fabric. "That is a very beautiful fox," I whispered. "He looks like he has had many adventures." A tiny shrug was the only response. I tried again, thinking of the warmth and smells of the kitchen. I was just in the kitchen. We finished making the strawberry ice cream. I paused, giving her a moment. "Do you like strawberry ice cream?" She was silent for a beat, then gave a barely perceptible nod against my stomach. Finally, She pulled back just enough to look at me. Her eyes were huge, dark, and red-rimmed from crying. She whispered, the sound so faint I almost missed it. Mommy made panna cotta. Behind me, I heard Matteo Lucero take a sharp breath, a sound of pure shock. He spoke to his guard, his voice rough, almost disbelieving. She spoke. The guard, the mountain of a man, just nodded, looking stunned. Yes, sir. I looked back at Ayase's face. This was the first time she had spoken to a stranger in months, maybe even a year. The tension in the room subtly shifted. The anger seemed to dissipate, replaced by a stunned, heavy quiet. The three women looked completely lost and confused. This was definitely not on their carefully prepared agenda. The core conflict suddenly became crystal clear. The Lucero family, his organization, needed a proper alliance, a marriage that brought money, power, or peace. They needed one of the women in the silk dresses. They certainly didn't need Rowan Hale, the former nursing student who smelled faintly of garlic and flour. Ayase had just derailed a dynasty's carefully laid plans. The dinner was, of course, over. Matteo Lucero nodded curtly to the three women. My apologies. This evening has concluded. They were quickly ushered out, their faces tight with manufactured sympathy that barely concealed their barely contained fury. Marco rushed over, wringing his hands nervously. Mr. Lucero, I am so sorry. She is new. Matteo held up a hand. Wait, Matteo said. Marco stopped mid-apology. I stopped too. I had started to stand up, intending to slowly back away toward the kitchen. Matteo Lucero looked directly at me. He wasn't angry anymore. His expression was carefully calculating. My daughter, he began. She has selective mutism stemming from trauma. She has not spoken to anyone outside of the immediate household in 11 months. I looked at Ayase. She was holding her father's hand now, but she was still staring at me, her gaze intense. Her small hand reached out, her fingers just barely brushing my apron. The press will hear of this, he said, more to himself than to me. The failed meeting. He was thinking aloud, strategizing. This is not clean. He needed to control the narrative to spin the story in his favor. He needed a bridge, something to smooth things over. He looked from his daughter to me, and a plan seemed to form in his cold, dark eyes. I have a proposition for you, he said. It wasn't a request. It was a statement of intent. You have a calming effect on her. I'm a waitress, I said, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts. I know what you are, he replied, his tone not unkind but matter-of-fact. I will hire you to be her companion. A temporary measure to stabilize the situation until she is ready for a more permanent arrangement. A companion, a glorified nanny, a piece of carefully crafted public relations strategy. I thought of my cramped apartment, the final demand letters stacking up on my counter, threatening legal action. The debt was a mountain I could never hope to climb on my own. He named a number, a weekly salary that made my head spin. It was more than I made in 3 months. It was enough. It was enough to pay them off, all of them, to finally be free of that crushing burden. I looked at his face, so controlled and hard, a mask of power. Then I looked at Ayase. She was watching me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear, holding her breath. She was terrified I would say no, shattering her fragile hope. In that moment, she wasn't a mafia boss's daughter. She was just a 6-year-old girl who had lost her mother and her voice. Yes, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. I will do it. But I wasn't looking at Matteo Lucero. I was looking at Ayase, at her desperate hope. I will do it for her. My last shift at Cento was quiet and uneventful. Marco paid me in cash, his hands trembling slightly as he counted out the bills. He looked both relieved and terrified. You are a good girl, Rowan, he said, avoiding my gaze. Just be careful. The Lucero penthouse wasn't a home. It was a statement, a display of wealth and power. It occupied the entire top floor of a glass tower that pierced the sky, overlooking the river and offering panoramic views of the entire Chicago skyline. The furniture was minimal, expensive, and cold, lacking any personal touch. The silence was absolute, broken only by the low hum of the air filtration system and the quiet murmur of guards speaking into their wrist communicators. My probationary period began. I was assigned a guest room that was 3 times the size of my apartment. Isa, however, didn't speak to me for the first 2 days. She watched me, constantly assessing me. She followed me from room to room, her ever-present stuffed fox clutched tightly in her hand, her feet making no sound on the cold marble floors. She was a shadow, a silent observer trying to figure me out. I wasn't a nanny. I wasn't a therapist. I was just Rowan, an unknown quantity in her carefully controlled world. On the 3rd morning, I decided to take the initiative. I went to her room. She was sitting on the floor of her bedroom, which was filled with more toys than most stores. She wasn't playing with any of them, though. "I am going to the library," I said, keeping my voice calm and even. "I am leaving in 10 minutes. You are welcome to come with me." I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked toward the elevator. The guard, a large man named Leo, looked at me, then at Isa, who had appeared at my side, clutching her coat in her hand. We drove in one of the black SUVs. The interior smelled like new leather and gun oil, a strange and unsettling combination. We went to the main public library, a beautiful building of stone and sunlight. Leo stayed by the door, trying and failing to look casual. Isa's hand was a tiny, cold bird in mine. We walked to the children's section. I found a book about a fox who gets lost and has to find his way home. We sat on a brightly colored rug, and I began to read to her. My voice was low and steady, soothing. I didn't ask her any questions. I just read the story. She leaned her small head against my arm, relaxing just a little. On the way out, I stopped at a small cart selling juice boxes. "I would like a strawberry juice," I said to the cashier, making a point of being polite. I looked at Isa. "What about you?" She just looked at the woman behind the counter, her eyes wide with mild panic. "It is okay," I said softly, directing my words only to her. "You can just point." She pointed to the apple juice. I paid for the drinks. As we walked away, I leaned down and whispered in her ear, "The next time we come, maybe we can practice saying thank you to the lady, just a whisper. Would that be okay?" She gave me a single, jerky nod. The heart of the penthouse was its kitchen. It was massive, all stainless steel, and looked like it had never been used. The refrigerator was almost empty, containing only bottled water and a single, perfectly arranged bowl of lemons. I remembered her words. Mommy made panna cotta. I gave a grocery list to Leo. He looked confused, as if I had asked him to perform brain surgery, but he returned an hour later with everything on the list. Cream, sugar, vanilla beans, gelatin. I found Isa and gently led her into the sterile kitchen. I found an apron, one of her mother's probably, and tied it loosely around her small waist. "We are going to make a mess," I told her, smiling reassuringly. I showed her how to split the vanilla bean, the tiny black seeds dotting the creamy surface. I let her hold the whisk, her small hands struggling to mix the heavy liquid. "My mother and I used to make cookies," I said, keeping my voice light. "She always let me lick the spoon. She said that was the best part." Sa didn't look up, but she stopped stirring. She used this bowl," Sa whispered, her voice barely audible. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I looked at the heavy ceramic bowl we were using. "It is a good bowl," I said quietly, my voice filled with a warmth I didn't know I possessed. The smell of vanilla and warm cream filled the cold, impersonal room. It smelled like a home, like love. When the mixture was done, we poured it into small glasses and put them in the refrigerator to set. I was wiping down the counter when I saw him. Matteo Lucero was standing on the glass veranda that overlooked the kitchen. He was in his suit, his jacket off, his tie loosened. He was just standing there, silently watching us. He wasn't the boss, the powerful and intimidating man from the restaurant. He wasn't the dangerous man the rumors warned about. He was just a father, locked out of his daughter's world, watching her do something normal, something that made her happy. I gave Isa a spoon to lick. A sound bubbled up from her chest, a small, rusty giggle. She had spilled cream on her nose, and she was laughing. Matteo heard it. He took a step toward the glass, his hand resting on the door as if he wanted to be closer. His face was a mask of shock and something else, something I couldn't quite read. He looked at me, and his eyes were dark and intense. The world outside the glass box didn't wait. The story of the failed blind date exploded in the media. I was naive. I hadn't understood the level of interest. Matteo Lucero trying to remarry wasn't just gossip. It was front-page news. The three women were prominent figures in their own right. An oil heiress, a corporate lawyer, a senator's daughter. Then someone leaked a photo of me, blurry and taken from across the street, showing me getting into the SUV with ISA. The headlines were brutal, sensationalized. Waitress versus Lucero's shocking new choice. My past was dissected and scrutinized. The medical debt. The fact that I had dropped out of nursing school. The articles painted me as a gold digger, a schemer who had manipulated a grieving child to get close to her wealthy father. I got a call from Marco. He was hysterical, barely able to speak. "Rowan, my restaurant. They are picketing the socialites. They say I am a part of this scandal. They are canceling reservations. I am ruined." I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold and weak. I wasn't just a complication. I was a wrecking ball, threatening to destroy everything in my path. I found Matteo in his office, a room that was just screens and maps of the harbor, a command center. "I have to go," I said, my voice shaking. "I am destroying Marco's life. I am making things worse for you." He didn't look up from his screens. "Sit." I stood my ground. "I will not." He finally turned, his eyes glacial. "The leak was not an accident. This is Dominic Moretti, the Moretti Group. He is a rival. He doesn't use guns, he uses data, public relations, and urban development contracts. He wants my shipping lanes. He is trying to make me look unstable, to panic my shareholders, to make the city commission doubt me." "What does this have to do with me?" I asked, confused. "You are an unknown variable. He's using you. The Waitress is a good story. It makes me look impulsive, weak." He paused, his gaze hardening. "As for Marco, it is handled. My lawyers are with him now. His legal fees are paid. He has been given a grant for his inconvenience. He will be fine." He hadn't asked. He had just fixed it, just made the problem disappear. He had bought my old boss's silence. "You cannot just buy people," I whispered, horrified. "I can," he said simply, his voice devoid of emotion. "I just did." The trust with ISA was a fragile thing, built in millimeters, requiring constant care. One afternoon, she looked particularly tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "Time for a nap," I said gently. She went to her bed, but lay there, her eyes wide open, unblinking. The lights in the penthouse were automatic, always bright, never dimming. She looked at me, her small body tense. Then she held out her stuffed fox, the one with the torn ear, the one she never let go of. "Can you hold him?" she whispered. "So he is safe." My breath hitched in my throat. I took the small, worn toy, feeling its familiar weight in my hands. "I will keep him safe. Promise." She sighed, a tiny sound of relief, and her eyes finally closed. She fell asleep in the middle of the daylight, trusting me. I sat in the chair next to her bed for 2 hours, holding that fox, feeling the weight of what she had just given me, the depth of her trust. Matteo wanted to talk that evening. He had heard from her therapists that her progress was remarkable. "I want to increase your hours," he said, his voice carefully neutral. He was standing by the window, looking down at the glittering city lights. "Full time. I will move you in here." "No," I said, the word sharp and immediate. He turned, his patience wearing thin. "I'm paying you an obscene amount of money, Rowan. This is not a negotiation." "I am not one of your shipping containers, Matteo." The name slipped out without thinking, and he stiffened, his eyes narrowing. "You cannot just schedule her healing. You cannot control this. You are trying to manage her grief like a business merger. It is trauma. It is messy. It does not follow a spreadsheet. And you are the expert? He shot back, his voice laced with sarcasm. A nursing student who quit. The word stung, hitting a raw nerve. But I held my ground, refusing to back down. I know that a child needs normalcy, a home, a place where she can feel safe. I motioned to the glass walls, the silent guards, the sheer opulence of the penthouse. Is not normal. It is a gilded cage. She needs the library. She needs to go to the park by the river. She needs to be a 6-year-old, not a public relations asset. We were yelling, or rather, he was just getting colder, more dangerous with each word. She needs protection, he said, his voice a low growl. She needs connection, I countered, meeting his gaze head-on. I will stay. I will keep helping her, but on one condition. He was silent, waiting for me to continue. Stop using her. Stop using me. I saw the papers. You are letting them spin the story that I am your new girlfriend. It is a shield for you, but it puts a target on her. I will not be a party to it. You want me to help your daughter? Then you let me help her, not your image. He stared at me for a full minute, his expression unreadable. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the wheels turning as he weighed the pros and cons. Fine, he said, biting off the word as if it tasted bitter. We do it your way for now. I kept my apartment. I needed it desperately. I needed to be able to lock my own door, a door that didn't have a guard standing outside it. I left the penthouse around 11 one night. The air was cold and damp, clinging to my skin. My car was parked 3 blocks away in a public garage. A dark pickup truck, old and battered, pulled out of the alley as I turned onto my street. It stayed 2 car lengths behind me, never wavering. I turned right and it turned right. I turned left and it turned left. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a message, a threat. This was Moretti making his presence known. I grabbed my phone and sped up, running a yellow light, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The truck stayed with me, relentless. I didn't drive home. I knew that was what they wanted. I drove to the nearest police station, seeking safety in the bright lights and the presence of law enforcement. The moment I swerved into the brightly lit parking lot, the truck's engine roared, and it sped off into the night, disappearing into the shadows. I sat there shaking, my hands locked on the steering wheel, trying to catch my breath. I called him, my voice surprisingly steady despite my fear. A truck followed me, I said, my words concise and clear. A dark pickup. It is gone now. I'm at the precinct on 18th. His response was a string of curses, low and violent, his anger barely contained. I'm sending Leo. He drives you from now on. You are done walking. No, I said, the word out before I could even think. What did you say? He demanded, his voice dangerous. I said no. That is what they want. They want to scare me. They want you to lock me in the tower. If I take your driver, if I live in your fortress, then Isa never gets to be normal. She never gets to go to the library. She will always be the boss's daughter. I will not do that to her. I will be more careful, but I will not be your prisoner. There was a dangerous, heavy silence on the line. I had just defied him again, pushing back against his control. You are a fool, Rowan, he whispered, his voice laced with a mixture of anger and grudging respect. Good night, Matteo, I said, and I hung up, severing the connection. I didn't sleep that night, my mind racing, replaying the events of the evening. The next morning, I drove back to the penthouse, bracing myself for the confrontation that was sure to come. I felt tired, scared, but also strangely alive, emboldened by my defiance. When I walked in, Isa ran to me, her face lighting up with a genuine smile. She was beaming, a rare and precious sight. She was holding a piece of paper, clutching it tightly. It was a drawing, a crayon drawing, clearly done by her. It showed 3 people, a tall man in a suit, a little girl with a drawing of me with dark hair, and a woman with brown hair in a simple blue dress. My dress. We were all holding hands, a bright yellow sun beaming down on us from above. Then she bolted past me, heading straight for the massive, imposing stainless steel refrigerator. Reaching out, she snatched a magnet, a gaudy promotional item, emblazoned with the logo of one of his shipping companies. She pinned the drawing to the door. It was a declaration, a simple statement of fact as only a 6-year-old could make, a picture of her family. I glanced at the drawing, then at the guard stationed by the door in this house, in this life. That simple, innocent piece of paper wasn't just art. It was an act of war. S.A.'s drawing of the three of us remained on that imposing stainless steel refrigerator, held in place by a cheap magnet shaped like a cargo ship. In a house defined by calculated minimalism, it was a bright, defiant splash of color, a little act of rebellion. The fragile piece that drawing represented lasted exactly 48 hours. The next attack from Dominic Moretti didn't arrive in a dark truck. It came through the internet. An anonymous email was sent to every major media outlet in Chicago, containing scanned copies of Lucero Logistics contracts. They were genuine documents, but carefully cut, spliced, and edited, manipulated to suggest smuggling, payoffs, and deals with unsanctioned foreign entities. The press erupted. The legitimate side of Matteo's world began to crumble. I found him that morning in his office. He wasn't shouting. Worse, he was perfectly still, watching the data streams on his wall of screens turn from green to red. "He's squeezing," Matteo said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't even turn to look at me. "He's painting me as a criminal to my legitimate partners. He timed this perfectly. He knows the family is pushing for an alliance." He finally turned, his face pale, his eyes dark. Dominic Moretti sent a message, an offer of truce. A truce? I felt a chill run down my spine. A marriage alliance. He spat the words out as if they were poison. "He's proposing I marry his niece, Bianca Moretti." I knew the name. Everyone did. Bianca Moretti wasn't just a socialite. She was Ivy League educated, brilliant, ruthless, and beautiful. She was deeply involved in her uncle's corporate dealings. She was the perfect weapon. A marriage wouldn't be a marriage. It would be a merger, locking down the Chicago harbor. It would end the war. "It's a perfect move," Matteo said, his voice devoid of emotion. "It would stabilize the business. It would satisfy my family elders. It would double our power." Are you considering it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I felt sick. "I am not," he said. "But the family is. The elders. They see it as the only logical path. They've arranged a dinner tonight for me to meet her." Isa, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of his office drawing, went still. She had heard. Children always hear. Later, when the housekeeper, a stern woman named Mrs. Petrov, tried to dress Ella in a new, stiff velvet dress for the dinner, the screaming began. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a raw, primal sound of terror. I ran to her room. S.A. had kicked off the dress and was hiding under her massive bed, clutching her fox. "I don't want her," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I don't want a new mommy. I want Rowan." Mrs. Petrov looked at me, her face tight with disapproval. "Mr. Lucero is waiting. The family is arriving." Matteo appeared in the doorway. He looked like a man being torn in two, his face tight with exhaustion and stress. "Rowan," he said, his voice flat. "She won't come down. The family is waiting. Bianca Moretti is downstairs." "Then I'm not going," I said, my heart pounding against my ribs. "I'll stay here with her." "No." His eyes were hard, the calculating boss back in place. "You will get her ready. You will put her in the dress, and you will both come down. You're her companion, so accompany her." It was a command. He wasn't asking me to help. He was ordering me into the lion's den, using me as a shield, or perhaps as a sacrifice. I crawled under the bed. Isa was sobbing, her small body shaking. "Hey!" I whispered. "It's just dinner. It's not a decision. It's just food. I'll be right next to you. I won't leave your side. Promise." Took 20 minutes, but I finally got her into the dress. I held her hand as we walked down the marble staircase toward the sound of polite, cold voices. The main dining room was terrifying, dominated by a dark mahogany table that could seat 30. It was filled with old men in dark suits and older women in severe, expensive dresses. They all looked like judges, and they all looked at me with open disdain. And there, seated at Matteo's right, was Bianca Moretti. She was perfect, her hair dark and sleek, her dress a deep red that radiated confidence. She had intelligent eyes and a smile that was both warm and sharp. She looked at me, then at Isa, with a polite, unreadable curiosity. I was wearing a simple black dress, the only nice thing I owned. I felt like a field mouse at a table of wolves. Matteo had placed a chair for me next to Isa at the far end of the table, as far from the center of power as possible. The dinner was agonizing. The clink of silver on china was the only sound for long stretches. I cut Isa's food into tiny pieces. She sat stiffly, her head down, clutching her fox in her lap. An older woman, Matteo's aunt, Zia Elena, looked down the long table at me, her pearls as large as marbles, her voice like dry ice. "Matteo," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's a family matter. Must the help eat with us?" The silence that followed was absolute. Every fork stopped. I froze, the blood rushing to my face. I could feel Bianca Moretti's eyes on me. I was the help, the waitress, the girl with flour on her apron. I was nothing. Before I could even breathe, Matteo's voice cut through the room. It wasn't loud. It was cold, lethal. "Zia Elena, Rowan is a guest in my home. She's here at my invitation as my daughter's most trusted friend." He paused, his eyes pinning the old woman to her chair. "If you have a problem with her presence, you are free to leave." The woman's powdered face tightened. She looked away, her lips a thin white line. It was a declaration of war against his own blood. Bianca Moretti watched the entire exchange. She didn't smile. She just observed, her head tilted, measuring the new landscape. She looked at Matteo, then at me. It was a look of pure calculation. The cut from his aunt had been deep, but Matteo's defense of me was a tactical nuclear weapon. Later, I found him on the veranda, the city lights glittering below us. "They hate me," I said quietly. "They fear what they do not control," he said, staring at the harbor. "Moretti is pushing. Bianca is smart. She's offering stability. The family sees her as the answer. The press is painting me as unstable. I need a counter move." "Then show them," I said, an idea forming, born from my own past, my old neighborhood. But not his way, not with threats, not with a marriage. "Your family has the Lucero Foundation. It's just a name on a website, a tax shelter. Use it. Make it real." He turned, intrigued. "How?" "The West Side," I said, my voice gaining strength. "The neighborhood I grew up in, the kids there. They have nothing. Moretti uses that area for his dirty recruiting, for his runners. He preys on them. What if you offered something else? What if the Lucero Foundation funded a community cooking program, a safe place after school, real skills? It's not just charity. It's a strategic move. It's healing. It's good press. It's also actually good." He was quiet, letting the idea settle. "A cooking program," he repeated, testing the words. "You fight his data with tomato sauce," I whispered. "You fight his narrative. You show you're building, not just controlling. You show you're a part of Chicago, not just a man who owns it." A slow smile touched his lips. It was a rare, startling thing. "That's clever, Rowan. That's very, very clever." He moved faster than I could have imagined. Within 1 week, his people had secured a church basement on the west side. It was old, but it was clean. They had installed 6 small cooking stations. I was bafflingly put in charge. Isa, who now refused to leave my side, was my self-proclaimed head assistant. The first class was pure chaos. 10 kids, all under 12, vibrating with nervous energy and suspicion. They didn't trust this. They didn't trust the clean, new equipment. They didn't trust me. We were making a simple pasta sauce from scratch. In the middle of the lesson, he showed up, Mateo Lucero. He was wearing a shirt that probably cost $2,000, and he looked completely, utterly lost. The kids stared. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, wiping tomato on my apron. "Observing my investment, Kara," he said. A small, wiry boy named Sam pointed a wooden spoon at him. "Mister, you gonna help or just stand there?" Before Mateo could answer, I untied my apron and tossed it at him. "We need the onions diced small." He stared at the onion as if it were a hostile negotiator. He picked up the knife and he was awful. Clumsy, awkward. He, the man who controlled the entire Chicago port system, was being defeated by a simple vegetable. The kids started to snicker. His eyes started to water profusely. "This is caustic," he muttered, blinking rapidly. I say, seeing her powerful, untouchable father struggling and crying over an onion, burst out laughing. It wasn't a giggle. It was a full, joyous belly laugh, a sound I'd never heard. She ran over and patted his arm. "It's okay, Papa," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "Rowan says you just have to be brave." He looked at his daughter, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. He looked at the half-mangled onion. He looked at me, his eyes streaming, and he kept chopping. Amid the rich smell of olive oil and garlic, our eyes met. He wasn't the boss. I wasn't the help. We were just two people covered in onion fumes watching his daughter laugh. The moment was short, but it was real, and it terrified me more than any of Moretti's men. The community kitchen was a massive, unexpected success. The press loved it. It was the perfect counter-narrative. Dominic Moretti must have hated it. His next move wasn't strategic. It was cruel. I was driving ISA home from the library 2 days later. We were on the Franklin Street Bridge. A dark pickup truck, the same one that had followed me, slammed into my rear bumper. It wasn't a hard hit. It was a calculated jolt, sending my small car into a shallow spin on the wet pavement. SA screamed. The truck sped off. We were fine, shaken but physically unharmed. But by the time we got back to the penthouse, 2 people were waiting for us in the lobby. A man and a woman in plain, rumpled suits. "Miss Rowanhale?" the woman asked, her eyes cold. "I'm Agent Miller, Department of Child Services." My blood turned to ice. "We received an anonymous tip," she said, reading from a file, alleging child endangerment, reckless driving with a minor present. "We also have photos." She held up grainy 8x10 pictures. They were of me and Ella on the bridge. The photos were timed perfectly. They didn't show the truck, just showed my car spinning. "We have a report that you are an unstable presence, hired from a restaurant with a history of severe debt. We're here to assess the child's safety." Mateo arrived. I'd never seen him angry. This was something else. This was a cold, silent inferno. He handled the child services agents with a terrifying, icy courtesy. He showed them Ella, who was safe and clinging to my hand. Then his team of lawyers arrived, and the agents left, promising a full and immediate investigation. When they were gone, he went to his office. He made one call. He called a meeting. I heard him. The soundproofing was good, but his voice carried. He was shouting. Other men were there, his capos, his lieutenants. "This is a line," one man roared. "He puts his hands on the girl. He uses the city against us. We end this, Mateo, the old way. Tonight, we cut the head off the snake," another yelled. There was a heavy crash. Mateo had swept something from his desk. "Quiet," he roared. "Silence. He wants me to use violence," Mateo said, his voice a low, lethal growl. "He wants me to be the animal he tells the press I am. He wants me to make a mistake. He wants me to give him leverage. We will not." There was a confused murmur. "We will not use guns," Mateo continued. "We will use law. We will use data. We will find the digital trail. We will find the man who called child services. We will find the driver of that truck. We will find the leak in the Port Authority. We will dismantle him piece by legal piece. We will use his own weapons against him." It was a new language for him, a language I had helped teach him, and in his mouth it sounded far more terrifying than any bullet. He found me later. I was in the community kitchen. It was late, almost midnight. I was just scrubbing counters, trying to make my hands stop shaking. He came in, his suit jacket gone, his sleeves rolled up. "My tech team is starting the trace," he said. He looked exhausted. "Mateo, this is my fault," I whispered. "I'm the target. I'm your weak spot. He's attacking you through me. Maybe I should go. For her safety." "No." He stepped closer until he was only inches away. "You are not my weak spot, Rowan." He reached out, his hand touching my cheek, his thumb rough against my skin. "You are. You're the only part of this that makes any sense." I stared up at him. "I came in here," he said, his voice quiet. "I came here to chop onions. I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I had ever done. And then I heard her laugh. My daughter. I haven't heard her laugh like that since her mother." He stopped, his throat working, looked at me, and his eyes were not cold. They were raw. "Rowan," he started, his voice thick. "I don't want Bianca Moretti. I don't want an alliance. I want—" His phone buzzed, a harsh, demanding sound that shattered the moment. He pulled it out. His face went dark. "What?" He listened. "They what? How many? From which warehouse?" He looked at me, all emotion gone, the boss back in place, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Moretti." He didn't wait. He just used his Port Authority contact to seize 2 of my warehouses. An anonymous tip about contraband. He's choking my supply line. He strode out of the kitchen, already barking orders into the phone. "Get the legal team on the line now." I stood there, the smell of old coffee and yeast in the air. I was standing on a knife's edge. This wasn't a game. This wasn't a romance. This was a war. People were getting hurt. My reputation was destroyed. His entire empire was at risk. He was offering me something, a life, but it was a life where phones ring in the dark, where warehouses are seized, where cars are run off bridges, where child services comes to your door. I looked at the small, colorful cutting board where ISA had been learning to chop carrots. I wasn't going anywhere. She needed me, and I realized with a terrifying jolt, starting to need him. I would see this through. I had to. The seizure of the warehouses was the move that broke the family's patience. That night, after the lawyers had filed the first injunctions and the phones had finally stopped ringing, the elders convened. It wasn't a meeting. It was a trial. I watched through the glass of Mateo's office as he stood before a massive video screen, his face grim. His aunts and uncles, the council of the family, stared back at him, their faces cold. When he finally emerged hours later, he looked as if he had aged 10 years. "They've given me an ultimatum," he said, his voice hollow. He walked to the window, staring down at the lights of his city. "The Moretti situation, the press, the child services visit. They see it all as a failure of my leadership. They believe I'm compromised." "Compromised by what?" I whispered, though I already knew the answer. "By you." He said it flatly, a fact, not an accusation. "They see Bianca Moretti as the only solution, a way to merge with Moretti, to end the war, to stabilize the family. They've given me 30 days. Marry Bianca, or they will invoke the family charter. They will freeze the trust, all of it. My operational funds, my personal accounts, my legal retainers. Everything. They will cut me off completely." He was trapped. Dominic Moretti had him in a pincer move, with his own family acting as the other blade. "What are you going to do?" I asked, my stomach twisting. "What they want me to do," he said. "I'm going to give them a show." 2 days later, I understood what he meant. It was grotesque. The family elders, led by Zia Elena, had decided to correct the narrative. They were restaging the blind date. It was a command performance, a public act of surrender. We were back at Cento, the same private dining room, only this time it was filled with flowers. Zia Elena had invited a hand-picked list of society reporters and friendly media bloggers. It was a setup. Bianca Moretti was already there, seated at the table, looking radiant in a cream-colored dress. She was the picture of grace. Mateo stood beside her, his face a mask of stone. "Why are we here?" I hissed at him. I was standing by the service entrance, my designated spot. I had been ordered to bring ISA. "We're here," Mateo said, his voice low, "because they want a visual. They want the waitress companion to be seen graciously handing my daughter over to the new mother. They're documenting my compliance." ISA was trembling, her hand locked in mine. She was wearing the same blue velvet dress from the first night, a cruel piece of stagecraft. "I don't like it," she whispered, hiding her face against my leg. "The lady with the pearls is watching me. Zia Elena." She was holding court, smiling at the reporters. "Mr. Lucero has simply been taking time to make a considered choice for his daughter's future," she was saying, portraying him as a man who values family above all else. "Bring the child," the old woman commanded, gesturing to me. I felt sick. I looked at Mateo, a silent, desperate appeal. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was trapped, and he was dragging us into the cage with him. "It's okay," I whispered to ISA, forcing a smile. "We just have to sit for 5 minutes. I'll be right here. I won't leave you." I walked her to the table, her small feet dragging on the rug. I sat her in the chair beside Mateo. Bianca Moretti leaned in, smooth, her voice warm. "Hello, Ella. So nice to see you again." She pushed a beautifully wrapped box across the table. "I heard you like animals, so I found something very special for you." ISA just stared at it. She looked at Bianca, then at her father. He was looking at his water glass, his jaw so tight I thought it might break. Then her eyes found mine. Across the room, I saw the panic rise in her, the sense of absolute betrayal. "No," ISA said, her voice small. Zia Elena's smile tightened. "What's that, dear?" "No." ISA shoved the gift, clattered to the floor. "No." She scrambled from her chair. "ISA." Mateo yelled, reaching for her, but she was gone. She ran just as she had done the first time. She ran past the reporters, past her glowering great-aunt, past her father's chair. She ran straight to me, slammed into my waist, and locked her arms around me. She buried her face in my simple black dress, and she howled. It wasn't a cry. It was a scream of raw, primal grief and terror. "I want her. I want Rowan," she shrieked, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "I don't want her. I don't want anybody else. I want Rowan." The room was dead. The only sound was my heart pounding and ISA's ragged sobs. The cameras were rolling, capturing every second of this disaster. Bianca Moretti looked stunned, her perfect composure finally cracking. Zia Elena's face turned a deep, mottled red. She stood, pointing a trembling, jeweled finger directly at me. This is an outrage. You," she spat. "You did this. You have poisoned this child. This is what happens when you let the help into the house. Get her out of here. Get that waitress out." A guard by the door took a step toward me. "Stop." Mateo's voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a razor. He had stood up. He didn't look at me, he didn't look at ISA. He walked step by measured step, until he was standing directly in front of his aunt. He was so close she had to crane her neck to look up at him. "Do not," he said, his voice a lethal whisper that everyone could hear, "ever speak about her that way again." The old woman's mouth fell open. He had never, in his life, spoken to her like that. He had just drawn a line in the sand, in front of the press, against his own blood. He turned to the stunned reporters. I knew I had to say something. This was my fault. I was the one who had brought this chaos into their lives. I held ISA's shaking body tighter. "I'm not a prize," I said. My voice was shaking, but it was clear. The reporters turned to me. "I'm not a choice in an alliance. I'm not. I am just the person that Isla feels safe with. That's all this is. That's all that matters." I looked at Mateo, my eyes begging him to stop. "Please don't do this to her." Mateo looked at me. The stone mask he usually wore was gone. His face was raw and exposed. He looked at his daughter, who was crying in my arms. He looked at his aunt, who was watching him with undisguised fury. Then he looked at Bianca Moretti. She met his gaze, and in a moment of extraordinary grace, she gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was permission. It was an abdication of her claim. He turned back to the reporters. The trap that had been set for him was broken. He was no longer a man being coerced. He was the boss making a choice. "My daughter's safety is not a political issue," he announced, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "Her healing is not up for negotiation." He looked directly at Zia Elena. "My family, I will respect her choice." He nodded to his head of security. "This event is over. Thank you for coming." To his personal guards, he said, "Escort everyone out, now." It was done. He had detonated the ultimatum that had been hanging over his head. He had chosen his daughter. He had chosen me. And he had, in all likelihood, just thrown away his entire fortune in the process. In the ensuing chaos, guards ushered the reporters and the apoplectic family members out of the room. We were left in a small, dim-service hallway by the elevators, just the three of us, suspended in the aftermath of what had just happened. Isla was still clinging to me, her sobs quieting into hiccups. I started, my voice thick with emotion. You know what you just did, don't you?" "Yes," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He looked undone, like he was falling apart. He looked terrified, but he also looked free. He looked at me, his eyes dark and frantic, like a man who was drowning in the depths. And then he moved. He put one hand on the wall beside my head, bracing himself. His other hand went to my waist, pulling me toward him. Isla was still wedged between us, but he didn't care. He leaned in, and his lips crashed onto mine. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was a kiss of pure, unadulterated panic. It was desperate, clumsy, and hard. It was all the fear and rage and exhaustion of the last few weeks all rolled into one. It was a plea and a declaration all at once. It tasted like expensive wine and the metallic tang of adrenaline. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. He pulled back, his breathing ragged. He was shaking. Or maybe it was me who was trembling. "Papa," Isla whispered, her small voice full of confusion and concern. The elevator doors pinged open. Leo, his guard, stood inside, his face a perfect mask of professional indifference. "Let's go home," Matteo said, his voice rough and strained. We stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing the three of us inside, a broken, terrified, and completely changed family. Isla fell asleep in the car, her small body finally succumbing to the emotional exhaustion of the day. I carried her to her bed, and she didn't let go of my hand. Even in her sleep, I sat there for an hour just watching her breathe, making sure she was okay. When I finally came out of her room, Matteo was standing by the wall of glass, his phone buzzing violently on the coffee table. He was deliberately ignoring it. "They'll be calling," I said, stating the obvious. "The council, your aunt." "Let them call," he said, cutting me off. "They'll cut you off, Matteo," I warned. "They'll freeze everything. Yes, they will ruin you. They can try," he said softly, a hint of defiance in his voice. Just then, his head of security, Leo, burst in from the private elevator, his face grim and serious. "Boss, you need to see this now." Leo turned on the massive screen on the wall. It wasn't the family calling. It was the news. Dominic Moretti hadn't wasted a single day. He had struck that very night, using the chaos of the failed press conference as cover. In the wake of the bizarre and chaotic Lucero press event, a news anchor was saying, her face somber, "A trove of new documents has been released by an anonymous source. These documents, which appear to be digitally certified, paint a far more damaging picture than previous leaks." On the screen flashed copies of bank transfers, offshore shell corporations, and shipping manifests with illegal cargo designations. All of them were brilliant forgeries, digitally aged and signed with what looked like Matteo's authentic signature. "The U.S. Attorney's Office has just confirmed," the anchor continued, that they are issuing immediate subpoenas for Mr. Lucero and his entire executive team on suspicion of racketeering and fraud. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just a business move. This was a kill shot. Moretti was framing him, setting him up for a fall. And he had done it at the exact moment when Matteo was most vulnerable, alienated from his family and his finances, emotionally exposed. I started to shake uncontrollably. "This is my fault," I blurted out. Matteo turned to look at me, concern etched on his face. "This is my fault, Matteo?" I repeated, my voice cracking with guilt and fear. "I told you to fight him. I told you to use the community kitchen. I made you soft. I made you look weak. He saw it, didn't he? He saw you defend me. He saw you break with your family. And he struck. If I had never been here, you would have taken the deal. You would have married Bianca. You would be safe right now." I backed away from him, the room spinning around me. "I am your weakness, Matteo. Your family knows it. Moretti knows it. I'm the reason this is happening to you." I turned away, my eyes blurring with tears. "I have to go. I have to leave. It's the only way to keep you safe." I turned to run to my room, to pack my bag, to disappear from his life. "Please don't go." I froze in my tracks. Isla was standing in the dark hallway, her small face pale and tear-streaked, her beloved stuffed fox clutched tightly in her hand. She had heard every word of my frantic confession. "Please, Rowan," she whispered, her lip trembling. "Please don't leave me." I ran to her, falling to my knees and pulling her into a hug so tight it ached. "I won't," I whispered, burying my face in her hair. "I won't leave you, Isla. Promise." Matteo was there, kneeling beside us, his large hand coming to rest gently on Isla's back. He was forming a circle with us, protecting us. He looked at me over his daughter's head. His eyes weren't cold. They weren't panicked. They were burning with determination and a fierce resolve. "He thinks this is the end," Matteo said, his voice a low, steady growl. "He thinks he's won. He's wrong. This isn't about the money, Rowan. It's not about the family, either. It's about this." His hand tightened gently on Isla's back. "It's about us." He looked at me, and his gaze was a vow. "We'll do this right. My way, your way, the hard way. No more lies, no more games." He paused, then said, "I'll burn him to the ground with the truth." He held out his free hand, palm up, in the space between us. "Stay, Rowan," he said. "Stay and fight with me." I looked at his strong hand, offering strength and support. I looked at the terrified child we were both holding, needing us to be strong. I put my hand in his. "I'll stay." We weren't just a couple anymore. We were a conspiracy, united against a common enemy. My hand in his was a silent vow of loyalty and commitment. The subpoenas were real. The family funds were frozen, and the press was circling the penthouse like vultures, waiting for the kill. We were trapped in the glass tower, the three of us, and the entire city was waiting for Matteo to fall from grace. "We have to maintain a routine," I insisted the next morning, my voice tight with anxiety. "Isla has her preschool program. We can't let them scare her." "You're not leaving this building," Matteo said, his voice brooking no argument. He was in his office, which was no longer a CEO's office but a war room where battles were planned and fought. "Yes, I am," I said, my newfound steel surprising even me. "Moretti wins if we hide, Matteo. He wins if he scares her into staying hidden away. I'll take Leo with me. I'll take 2 guards, but she's going to school. We're not prisoners, and we're not going to act like we are." He looked at me, a flicker of pride in his exhausted eyes. "Fine, but you're wired. Leo will have a live feed. My team will be watching every second. Every second, Rowan." The trip to school was tense. A silent procession of 2 black SUVs, but nothing happened on the way there. We dropped Isla off, and the teachers looked at me, their eyes full of pity and fear, sensing the danger that surrounded us. I ignored them and focused on Isla. It was on the way back that they struck. I was in the lead SUV with Leo driving. The second SUV, carrying 2 other guards, was behind us. We were crossing the Randolph Street Bridge. The black pickup truck came out of nowhere, barreling up a do-not-enter ramp at high speed. It wasn't the same truck as before. This one was new, heavy-duty, and reinforced, built for destruction. It slammed into the passenger side of our vehicle with a percussive explosion of metal and glass. Our SUV, heavy as it was, screeched and swerved violently, slamming into the concrete median that separated the lanes of traffic. Leo fought the wheel, trying to regain control. "Get down!" he roared at me, his voice filled with urgency. The truck reversed, its tires smoking, and rammed us again, even harder this time. It was trying to push us, to flip us over the low median and into the oncoming lanes of traffic, a potential disaster. "We're pinned," Leo yelled into his wrist mic, his voice strained. The second SUV was blocked by the sudden traffic chaos. "I see it," Mateo's voice crackled back, not in my ear but from the car's comm system. He was watching, seeing everything unfold on the screen in his war room. The truck pulled back, lining up for a third, high-speed impact, intent on finishing the job. "Leo," Mateo's voice was ice-cold, devoid of all emotion. "Turn into the truck on my mark. Hit the accelerator. Mark." Leo did it without hesitation. He yanked the wheel hard to the right and slammed his foot on the gas pedal. We collided with the truck, a glancing, grinding blow that sent us spinning wildly across the bridge. The truck was disabled, its front axle snapped from the impact. 2 men jumped out of the truck and started running, trying to escape. But Mateo was already several steps ahead of them. "They're on foot, heading north on Wacker." "I have them," he said, his voice calm and controlled. "Boss, I'm clear. Permission to pursue?" The driver of the second car yelled into his radio. "Negative," Mateo commanded. "You stay with Rowan. Get her secure. No one fires a shot. I repeat, no one fires a shot." I could hear him on another channel, not talking to his guards but to someone else, someone unknown. "They're 2 blocks north of the Opera House. Both males, dark clothing. Yes, I'm routing their signal now." He wasn't using his men. He was using the city's infrastructure, his vast network of resources, to hunt them down. The 2 men ran, but they were trapped in a maze of Mateo's making. As they approached an intersection, the traffic lights all turned red, creating an instant gridlock of angry cars, blocking their escape. They turned down an alley, and a city sanitation truck, one of his, suddenly stalled, blocking the exit, effectively cutting off their only escape route. "I have them," Mateo said, his voice still cold and emotionless. He was watching them on a municipal traffic camera, tracking their every move. "They're trapped between Lake and Randolph. I'm sending the police." He hadn't fired a single bullet. He hadn't broken a single law. He had used his logistics network, his control of the city's infrastructure, to catch them like rats in a trap. He had neutralized the threat with just a laptop and a few well-placed phone calls, proving his power was far more than just brute force. When we got back to the penthouse, I was shaking from the adrenaline, but Isla was in a full-blown panic attack, her body racked with sobs. The sound of the crash, the lurch of the car, had brought everything back to her, all the trauma of the past. She was huddled by the elevator, hyperventilating, struggling to breathe. Her small hands were clawing at the air, and her eyes were wide with a terror that wasn't just about today but about all the pain and fear she had experienced in her young life. Mateo ran to her, his face etched with concern. Isla, you're safe. Papa's here. Stop it, sweetheart. Just breathe." He was trying to command the panic away, to control it with his sheer force of will, but his frantic energy was only making her worse, escalating her fear. "Mateo, stop," I said firmly, pushing past him. My old nursing instincts took over, overriding my own fear and anxiety. I knelt in front of her, trying to make eye contact. "Hey, Isla, look at me," I said softly, trying to soothe her. "Look at my eyes. You're safe, Isla. You're safe now. But you're scared, and that's okay. It's okay to be scared. Let's get our breath back together. Okay?" I started taking exaggerated, slow breaths, demonstrating what I wanted her to do. In and out. Good. In and out. Now, I want you to play a game with me. It's the 5 game. Can you do that for me, sweetheart? She gave a tiny, shuddering nod, her eyes still locked on mine, her body trembling uncontrollably. Okay, I said, my voice low and calm, reassuring. Name 5 things you can see right now. Whisper them to me. Foxy, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Your hair, the floor, the light, Papa. Brilliant, I said, praising her effort. You got 5. Now, for things you can hear. What do you hear around us? The wind, my breath, your voice, the car. Cars outside, she managed to say, her breathing becoming slightly more regular. Perfect, I said, encouraging her. Now, 3 things you can feel. What can you feel in your hands? Foxy, she said, her grip tightening on the stuffed animal. The carpet. My dress. Good, I said. 2 things you can smell. Take a deep breath. What do you smell? She took a shaky breath, focusing on the scents around her. You smell like cookies, she whispered, her voice still trembling. I was wearing vanilla lotion, a familiar and comforting scent. 1 more, I said gently. 1 thing you can taste. What do you taste in your mouth? My tears, she whispered, her voice full of sadness. That's okay, I said, wiping her cheek with my thumb. You did it, Isla. You played the game. Look, your breath is back. You're doing great, sweetheart. She was calm, or at least calmer than before. The terror had receded slightly, replaced by a fragile sense of peace. She leaned forward and just rested her head against my shoulder, seeking comfort and reassurance. I looked up. Mateo was standing there, his face a mask of stunned awe. He had just seen me use a power he couldn't buy, a skill he couldn't acquire through money or influence. He had seen me heal what he could only contain, soothe what he could only try to control. That, he said, his voice thick with emotion. That was. How did you do that, Rowan? It's called grounding, I said, stroking Isla's hair. It's just a technique to pull you out of the panic and bring you back into the present moment. He nodded, not speaking, just watching me with a newfound respect and understanding. The war room was different now, transformed by the events of the day. The men he had captured were in police custody, and they were talking, eager to save themselves. They were hired guns, paid by a shell corporation, and the trail was getting warmer, leading closer to Moretti. Mateo was no longer surrounded by his old capos, the men who had been with him for years. He was flanked by a new team, a new kind of loyalty, a sharp woman named Alana, who was a civil rights attorney with a background in corporate fraud, and a young man named Ben, a digital forensic specialist who looked like he lived on coffee and code. Here it is, Ben said, pointing to the massive screen on the wall. He had the forged documents up, the ones that Moretti had used to frame Mateo. Moretti's smart. He used layered encryption, shell servers, all the tricks in the book. But he got arrogant, and that's where he slipped up. The metadata on the forged bank transfer, the big one that would have taken him down, is flawed. He typed rapidly on the keyboard, and a string of code appeared on the screen. The digital signature was created at 10:32 p.m. on Tuesday, but the server log from the Cayman Islands bank he spoofed shows the file was received at 10:31 p.m. He uploaded it a full minute before he technically created it. It's a digital impossibility, a paradox in the code. It's the fingerprint that proves it's a forgery. He rushed and he made a mistake. And the call to child services, Alana said, her voice crisp and professional. We got the tower log. It came from a burner phone, but that burner phone was only turned on for exactly 5 minutes. And in that time it made one other call right before dialing child services. She wrote a number on the whiteboard. Mateo stared at it, his face going white as he recognized the number. I know that number, he whispered, his voice filled with dread. He picked up his desk phone and barked an order into the receiver. Leo, bring Rocco to my office. Now, I had seen Rocco around, and I knew that he was one of Mateo's oldest guards, a man with graying hair who had been with the family for decades, a trusted confidant. He entered the office, flanked by 2 guards, his face pale with sweat and apprehension. "Boss?" Rocco asked, his voice trembling slightly. Matteo just pointed to the number on the whiteboard, his gaze unwavering. "That was your burner phone, Rocco. You made the call to child services, didn't you? You set Rowan up on the bridge. You've been feeding Moretti my schedules for 6 months. Why, Rocco? Why would you betray me like this?" Rocco collapsed, his knees hitting the cold marble floor. He had my son," he sobbed, his voice choked with emotion. "My son. He has a gambling problem. He owed Moretti's people $200,000. They were going to kill him if he didn't pay up. Moretti said he would wipe the debt clean, make it disappear. He just wanted to know when Rowan was alone, vulnerable." Matteo's face was stone, betraying no emotion, but I could see the pain in his eyes. The betrayal was absolute. A knife in the back from a man he had trusted with his life. A man he had considered family. The old Matteo, the man I had met at Cento, would have had Rocco taken to the docks, never to be seen again. Instead, he just looked at him with a cold, profound sadness, a deep sense of disappointment. "Get him out of my sight," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Later that night, I found Matteo on the veranda, staring out into the pouring rain. Isla was asleep, safe and sound in her bed. The penthouse was silent, filled with a heavy sense of sadness and unease. "They're holding Rocco downstairs," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "My men, the old guard. They're waiting for my order. The order to make him disappear, to erase him from existence." "What are you going to do, Matteo?" I asked softly, my heart aching for him. He was quiet for a long time, lost in his thoughts, wrestling with the ghosts of his past. When Elena, died, I was in the ambulance with her," he said, his voice cracking with grief. "She was already gone, but they were still working on her, trying to bring her back." He turned to look at me, his eyes hollow and haunted. "It was a blizzard. The city was frozen, paralyzed. The ambulance got lost twice on the way to the hospital. They were only 10 minutes away, but the snow, it made them late. They were 10 minutes too late, Rowan. 10 minutes too late to save her life." I stepped closer to him, my heart aching with compassion. "I swore then," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion, "that I would never be helpless again, that I would control everything of the weather, the streets, the time itself. I built this entire empire, Rowan, all of it just to fight a snowstorm, just to get those 10 minutes back, to prevent another tragedy." I reached out and put my hand on his chest, over his heart, feeling its steady beat beneath my palm. "Matteo, you can't control the snow. You can only control what you do, the choices you make. Control isn't the same as care, isn't the same as love. What you did today, catching those men without firing a shot, protecting Isla. What you did for Isla, bringing her back from the panic, comforting her. That's care, Matteo. That's love." He looked at me, his gaze raw and vulnerable. "You see that, don't you, Rowan? You see the man I'm trying to be, the kind of man I want to be." The next day, I was at the community kitchen, helping with the meal. It was the only place that felt sane, the only place where I could find some peace and purpose. The kids were there, laughing and playing. The comforting smell of tomato sauce and garlic filled the air. We were making lasagna, a hearty meal for the community. Suddenly, Matteo walked in, unannounced. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a dark gray sweater, looking more relaxed than I had ever seen him. The kids all stopped what they were doing and stared at him in surprise. "Mister," one of the children yelled, pointing at him, "you're going to cry at the onions again. Remember when you helped chop onions last time?" A small smile touched his lips, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Not today," he said, shaking his head. He walked straight to me, his eyes searching mine. He looked terrified, like he was about to jump off a cliff. "Rowan Hale," he said, his voice filled with emotion. In the middle of the bustling church basement, surrounded by 10 children with sauce smeared on their faces, Matteo Lucero dropped to one knee, a dramatic gesture that silenced the entire room. I clapped a hand over my mouth, shocked and overwhelmed. I hadn't seen this coming. "I don't have a ring," he started, his voice thick with emotion. "Well, not a fancy ring. I don't have an empire right now. My bank accounts are frozen. My family thinks I'm insane. I'm under federal investigation, and I'm madly in love with you, Rowan." I was openly crying now, tears streaming down my face. "You're the most terrifying, brave, and honest person I've ever met," he said, his eyes locked on mine, conveying the depth of his feelings. "You walked into my cold, dead life, and you taught me how to be a father, how to be human again. You taught me how to fight, not just with money and power, but with truth and integrity. You're not my weakness, Rowan. You're my strength, my entire life, my reason for fighting." He paused, took a deep breath, then added, "I've been building things that break, things that crumble under pressure. I want to build something that lasts, something real with you and Isla. I want us to be a family." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. It wasn't a huge diamond ring, the kind you'd expect from a man like Matteo Lucero. It was a simple, elegant platinum band, understated yet beautiful. "I bought this a week ago," he confessed, his voice shaking slightly. "I was just waiting for the courage to give it to you, waiting for the right moment, the right time." "Matteo?" I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "Marry me, Rowan Hale," he said, his voice filled with hope and vulnerability. "Help me build a real home, a home filled with love and honesty." The children were holding their breath, watching us with wide-eyed anticipation. I looked at this impossible, broken, magnificent man kneeling before me, offering me his heart and his future. "Yes," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "But on one condition." He waited, his eyes filled with hope and anticipation. "We do this right, Matteo," I said, my voice firm and resolute. "We choose the hard, honest way, no matter how difficult it may be. No more shadows, no more secrets, no more old ways. We give Isla a name she can be proud of, a future she deserves. We win this with the truth, with integrity, not with money or power." He stood up, a slow smile spreading across his face, transforming his features. "The hard way," he said, his voice filled with determination. "I agree. That's exactly what we'll do." He slid the simple, cool ring onto my finger, a symbol of his commitment to a new way of life. "Then, yes," I said, laughing through my tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The kids erupted in cheers, their joy and excitement filling the room. He acted fast, using our engagement as a catalyst for change. Rocco, the traitor, wasn't taken to the docks for a brutal execution. Instead, Matteo had Leo drive him to the nearest police precinct and hand him over, along with a full confession and all the evidence of Moretti's blackmail. It was a seismic act, a shocking move that reverberated throughout the city. Lucero was handing one of his own men over to the cops, breaking the code of silence that had protected him for so long. Matteo also liquidated his remaining high-risk operations, the gray areas of his business that had always been shrouded in secrecy. He poured the money publicly into the Lucero Foundation, announcing a plan to open 10 more community kitchens throughout the city, expanding his philanthropic efforts. Then he, Alana, and Ben took their file, the metadata, the impossible timestamps, Rocco's confession, and they didn't leak it to the press, as Moretti would have expected. They walked into the U.S. Attorney's office and handed it over, offering full cooperation in exchange for immunity for the legitimate side of Lucero Logistics, protecting the jobs of thousands of honest employees. The government, faced with a perfect, pre-built case against a man they had been trying to nail for years, agreed to the terms, eager to bring Moretti to justice. The FBI raid on Moretti Tower happened at dawn, catching everyone by surprise. It was on every news channel, a dramatic display of law enforcement power. Dominic Moretti, cornered and desperate, did the only thing he could. He lashed out, not at Matteo, but at me, trying to discredit me and undermine my credibility. The internet exploded with a coordinated smear campaign, a barrage of lies and half-truths designed to destroy my reputation. Stories circulated that I was a failed nurse who had been fired for stealing medication from the hospital, that I had a history of preying on vulnerable men, manipulating them for my own gain, that my mother's medical debt wasn't from cancer treatment but from a secret gambling problem. They were vicious, disgusting lies, skillfully crafted and terrifyingly plausible, designed to sow doubt and suspicion in the minds of the public. I was in the kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief as the lies spread like wildfire, the blood draining from my face as I realized the extent of Moretti's ruthlessness. When Matteo walked in, he didn't say a word. He just took my hand, his touch offering strength and reassurance. He led me to the penthouse lobby, where a full press conference was set up, filled with reporters eager to cover the latest developments in the Lucero-Moretti feud. He stepped up to the podium, his face a mask of cold fury, his eyes blazing with anger. "You've all read the lies about Miss Hale," he said, his voice booming with authority. "Now you're going to hear the truth, all of it." He didn't just deny the claims. He annihilated them, systematically dismantling Moretti's smear campaign with irrefutable evidence. He projected my nursing school transcripts, pristine and unblemished, onto the massive screen behind him. He showed a signed, notarized letter from my dean of nursing, praising my skills and integrity. He showed the itemized, paid-in-full invoices from my mother's oncology ward, proving that the debt was legitimate and that I had worked tirelessly to pay it off. "Dominic Moretti attacked my business," Matteo said, his eyes scanning the room, his gaze daring anyone to challenge him. "When that failed, he attacked my daughter, trying to use her as a pawn in his twisted game. And now, in his final, pathetic act of desperation, he attacks the woman I love, resorting to lies and slander to try and hurt me. This isn't journalism. It's character assassination. This is the last gasp of a dying criminal, a man who knows his empire is crumbling." He paused, his voice filled with unwavering conviction. "Miss Hale is my fiancée. She's my partner, and she possesses more integrity and strength than any person in this city. This attack on her is an attack on me, and it will be the last mistake Mr. Moretti ever makes." Matteo's press conference was a declaration of war fought with the truth, a powerful statement of defiance against Moretti's lies. The impact was immediate and decisive. The narrative so carefully poisoned by Dominic Moretti shattered, replaced by a wave of support and admiration for Matteo and me. The video of Matteo, his face cold with rage, defending my history, my mother's honor, and our engagement went viral, spreading across social media like wildfire. He hadn't just denied the lies. He had proven them to be malicious fabrications, leaving no room for doubt. The legal victory followed with breathtaking speed. The U.S. Attorney's Office, armed with Matteo's proactive cooperation, Rocco's detailed confession, and Ben's irrefutable digital evidence, unraveled Moretti's entire criminal enterprise, exposing his corruption and greed for all the world to see. The impossible timestamp on the forged documents was the key that unlocked everything, the thread that unraveled the entire fabric of his deceit. They seized servers from 3 different data centers, uncovering a vast network of illicit activities. They unearthed the command structures, the sprawling networks of bot farms bankrolled to amplify the fabricated news, and the clandestine accounts used to enlist the men who assaulted me. It was a fragile construction, a house of cards teetering on the brink, and Ben had deftly removed the one card that sent the whole thing crashing down. But there remained a final, critical piece of testimony, surfacing around the 1 hour 15 minutes and 34 seconds mark. The federal agents were meticulously building their case on charges of fraud and racketeering. However, they still lacked a definitive motive for the corruption that permeated the city level, the illicit port seizures, and the disturbing attack on child services. The vital clue emerged from the last person I would have ever suspected, Bianca Moretti. She made contact with Alana, Matteo's astute lawyer, through a secure and untraceable channel. She specifically requested a meeting, not with Matteo himself, but exclusively with Alana. Her intention was to cooperate fully with the investigation. I was present in Alana's office during this pivotal encounter. When Bianca arrived, she presented a starkly different image than I remembered. The impeccably polished armor she usually wore around 1 hour 16 minutes and 8 seconds was completely gone. She was dressed in a simple, understated suit, her hair pulled back into a no-fuss style. She looked undeniably tired, yet simultaneously, she exuded an aura of liberation. "My uncle is finished," she declared, her voice sharp and clear. She didn't betray a hint of sadness, only a detached sense of pragmatism. "He will undoubtedly attempt to drag me down with him, but I will not allow him to succeed." "Why are you here, Bianca?" Alana inquired, cutting to the chase. Bianca responded, her gaze fixed not on Alana, but directly on me. "My entire life," she began, "has been a series of negotiations, a complex contract of sorts. I was merely a tool for him to solidify an alliance, in much the same way he presumed Isla was a pawn for your family." She paused, taking a deep, fortifying breath around 1 hour 16 minutes and 43 seconds. "When I witnessed Mr. Lucero defy his own family at that ridiculous luncheon for his daughter and for you, I realized with startling clarity that I too had a choice to make. I no longer desire to live in a cage, regardless of how beautiful or gilded it may be." She then slid a slim, leather-bound folder across the polished surface of the desk. "This is not a digital file," Bianca emphasized. "My uncle is decidedly old school in his methods. He meticulously keeps hard copies of everything. These are the original zoning applications. His intention was never to seize control of Lucero Logistics. His true aim was to utterly destroy it. He has been systematically bribing city officials for the past 6 months to have the 1 hour 17 minutes and 18 seconds entire Port District rezoned for high-rise residential development. His ultimate goal was to bankrupt Mateo, seize the land at the subsequent auction, and erect luxury condominiums. This revelation was the linchpin, the missing piece of the puzzle, the undeniable motive. It was concrete proof of systemic corruption that extended far beyond the fabricated bank transfers. It was the final, decisive blow. With the case against Moretti now irrefutably public and airtight, the scattered fragments of my own life began to seamlessly realign. We received a formal, scheduled visit from Agent Miller of the Department of Child Services. She arrived at the penthouse, but this time she was alone, and notably, she was not carrying a file. She appeared deeply uncomfortable and apologetic. "Miss Hale, Mr. Lucero," she said, standing stiffly in the entryway. "I am here to formally inform you that our case is officially closed." I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I had been holding captive for weeks. "We have received a formal reprimand from the state's attorney," she continued, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "The anonymous tip that initiated our investigation has been traced, as you are aware, to a source now under federal 1 hour 18 minutes and 26 seconds indictment for racketeering. It was a malicious and entirely fraudulent claim." She looked directly at me. "I want to personally apologize for the actions of my department. We were manipulated and misled. Your file is now sealed and expunged." "Thank you, Agent Miller," Mateo responded, his voice polite yet laced with a distinct coolness. "And Miss Hale," she added, turning to leave, "your grounding technique, the 5-4-3-2-1 method, we have incorporated it into our new training manuals for nonverbal trauma cases. You were absolutely right. She is thriving." Isla's recovery was the most profound and deeply meaningful victory of all. The pervasive fear that had held 1 hour 19 minutes and 11 seconds, her captive within her own home, was steadily receding. She still experienced difficult days, still startled at sudden, loud noises, but the oppressive silence that had defined her existence had finally dissipated. The community kitchen was celebrating its very first graduation day. We were presenting certificates to the inaugural group of children who had successfully completed the intensive 8-week program. The basement was overflowing with proud parents, and steam billowed from an enormous pot of fragrant pasta. I delivered a short speech, expressing my gratitude to the kids for their diligent hard work. Mateo stood in the back, leaning against the wall, a quiet and undeniably proud observer. Does anyone want 1 hour 19 minutes and 47 seconds to share what they learned? I asked, scanning the eager faces. A few children shyly raised their hands, sharing anecdotes about learning to properly hold a knife or successfully avoiding burning the garlic. Then, Isla, who was standing confidently next to me in her own miniature apron, stepped forward. My heart skipped a beat. She gazed out at the assembled crowd of strangers, her small face radiating seriousness and determination. She located her father in the back, and he offered her a small, encouraging nod. "My name is Isla Lucero," she announced, her voice clear and remarkably strong. It did not waver, not even slightly. "I learned how to crack an egg with one hand. Mostly 1 hour 20 minutes and 22 seconds, she continued. And I learned all about vanilla." The room fell silent, captivated by this remarkable 6-year-old girl. "I learned," she said, her eyes meeting mine, "that panna cotta tastes like home. It used to taste like my first mommy. It was a sad taste." She paused, taking a steadying breath. "But now it tastes like Rowan. Tastes happy." I covered my mouth with my hand, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face in the back of the room. Mateo turned and pressed his forehead against the cool wall, his broad shoulders shaking with emotion. The Lucero family elders summoned Mateo for 1:20 and 58 seconds a.m. final, decisive meeting. This time, however, he did not go alone. I walked in beside him, our hands intertwined, the simple platinum band on my finger a silent declaration. The atmosphere was not celebratory in the least. It was somber, almost funereal. Zia Elena presided at the head of the long table. She fixed her gaze on me. The overt hostility that had once been so palpable had vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating assessment. "The banks have unfrozen the accounts," one of his uncles stated, breaking the heavy silence. "The federal investigation is now focused entirely on Moretti. The Lucero name is cleared." Zia Elena stated it. 1 hour 21 minutes and 37 seconds. It was not a compliment or a show of gratitude. It was merely a statement of undeniable fact. "You accomplished it without igniting a war. You operated within their established rules." She glanced at me, at my simple dress, at our joined hands. "The girl, this alliance, it is unorthodox but undeniably practical. The family accepts the arrangement." It was the closest I would ever receive to a formal apology. It was, at the very least, an acknowledgement. I was no longer perceived as simply the help. I was the person who had played a crucial role in saving their precious legacy. We didn't desire a lavish wedding, a grand ceremony in a cathedral, a ballroom filled with the very people who had recently attempted to tear us 1 hour 22 minutes and 18 seconds apart. It all felt performative and inauthentic. We chose to get married in the small, somewhat patchy yard behind the community kitchen. It was a Saturday, shortly after dusk had settled. We strung strands of warm, yellow lights from the branches of the old oak tree. The air was fragrant with the scent of freshly cut grass and the irresistible aroma of garlic bread that the kids were diligently baking inside for the informal reception. Our guests consisted of the children from the program, their families, Alana, Ben, and Leo. That was it. I wore a simple white dress that I had purchased at a regular department store. Mateo wore his finest blue suit, but notably he skipped the tie. Isla served as my adorable maid of honor, her small hands clutching 1:22 and 54 seconds a.m. cheerful bunch of bright daisies. A city judge, a close friend of Alana's, officiated the ceremony. In the midst of Mateo's heartfelt vows, a small boy suddenly yelled, "Tag, you're it!" And a boisterous group of children ran shrieking past us, completely oblivious to the momentous occasion. Mateo simply laughed, grabbed my hands and said, "I, Mateo, take you Rowan, in chaos and in quiet." "I, Rowan," I said, my voice thick with happy tears. "Take you Mateo in wealth and, well, you're not exactly poor anymore, but in all of it the hard way." "The hard way," he repeated, his eyes locking with mine. When the 1 hour 23 minutes and 34 seconds judge pronounced us husband and wife, he didn't simply kiss me. He pulled me into an embrace so tight it lifted me completely off the ground. A hug of pure, unadulterated relief. Isla ran towards us, her face beaming with joy. She was clutching her beloved stuffed fox, the one with the telltale torn ear, her constant companion and source of comfort. She held him out to me. "Sweetie," I asked, kneeling down to meet her gaze. "He's yours now," she declared, her voice firm and resolute. "For keeps. You have to keep him safe now." She was symbolically giving me her armor, her protection. She was telling me that she no longer needed it to feel safe and secure. I took the 1 hour 24 minutes and 8 seconds small, worn toy. "I will protect him with my life," I whispered, my voice full of emotion. I looked up at Mateo. He was staring intently at his daughter, his hand covering his mouth. He was crying. Not just the few stray tears I'd witnessed before, but a deep, profound, silent weeping. The tears of a man who had finally laid down his weapons, both literally and figuratively. We rebuilt. Mateo didn't merely restart his business. He completely transformed it. Lucero Logistics signed a groundbreaking new public transparency charter with the city. He actively invited oversight and accountability. He launched the Lucero Foundation's first major project, 1 hour 24 minutes and 45 seconds, the Westside Technical Scholarship. It provided full funding for any graduate of our community kitchen programs to attend trade school or obtain a valuable logistics certification. He was diligently building his new workforce from the ground up, prioritizing honesty, integrity, and opportunity. We received a postcard. It featured a stunning picture of the iconic Golden Gate Bridge. It was from Bianca Moretti. She hadn't relocated to the East Coast as many had assumed. She had headed west, embracing a new chapter. She had accepted a position as a senior compliance officer for a prominent tech firm. The brief note on the back was simple yet profound. "My uncle built a cage. You built a door. Thank 1 hour 25 minutes and 17 seconds you." It was her way of expressing both goodbye and heartfelt remorse. 1 year later, we made the conscious decision not to move out of the penthouse. We had finally learned how to transform it into a true home, a sanctuary filled with warmth and love. The cold, sterile marble floors were now adorned with an array of bright, mismatched rugs, adding splashes of color and personality. The sterile, empty walls had become a vibrant gallery of Isla's artwork, a chaotic and colorful explosion of crayon and paint. The stainless steel refrigerator was so completely covered in drawings, school notices, and whimsical magnets that you could barely glimpse the metal surface underneath. The community kitchen in the 1 hour 25 minutes and 52 seconds church basement was no longer just a single kitchen. The Lucero Foundation, now fully and legitimately funded, had recently opened its 4th thriving location. The program boasted a substantial waiting list, a testament to its impact and effectiveness. It was no longer solely about cooking skills. It was about imparting essential life skills, about providing a safe, warm, and welcoming place for kids to find refuge after school. It was a haven where dozens of children felt seen, valued, and supported. I was standing in the original kitchen, my hands deep in a bowl of dough, my belly round and full with a new life growing inside me, a little sunbeam. I was 7 months pregnant, and I 1 hour 26 minutes and 27 seconds felt a profound, settled peace that I had never known before. Isla, now a vibrant 7 years old and impossibly tall for her age, was at the station next to me. She was wearing a miniature apron that proudly proclaimed, "Big Sister in Training." She was teaching a group of wide-eyed 5-year-olds how to properly hold a whisk with the intense focus and precision of a seasoned surgeon. "No, Leo Jr.," she said gently, correcting a small, slightly clumsy boy. "You have to use your wrist, not your whole arm. Like this. See, you're making clouds, not splashing mud." She had launched her own class, affectionately dubbed the Little Cooks. She was a natural leader, patient, clear, and incredibly engaging. The selective mutism that had once defined her existence was now merely a faint ghost, a distant memory. She was, without question, the loudest, happiest, and most endearingly bossy person in the entire room. Mateo walked in. He looked different, softer somehow. The heavy, dark armor of the powerful boss was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. He was still wearing a suit, but it was lighter in both color and fabric. The permanent tension that had been etched into his shoulders had noticeably eased. He had spent the last 6 months diligently acquiring a slew of new certifications. He was no longer simply the owner of Lucero 1 hour 27 minutes and 37 seconds logistics. He was a fully certified operator, intimately familiar with every aspect of the business. He was the man who now negotiated with the Port Authority armed with detailed spreadsheets and comprehensive compliance reports, not through intimidation or shady backroom deals. He had learned that he could achieve far more by being smarter, more informed, and more ethical, rather than simply relying on brute force. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms gently around me and resting his hands protectively on my stomach. The baby kicked. "He likes it when you're here," I murmured, leaning back against his chest. "He has excellent taste," Mateo said, kissing the side of my neck. "Isla, your students are splashing flour 1 hour 28 minutes and 12 seconds on my shoes," he said, feigning annoyance. "It's good for them, Papa," she called back, not even bothering to look up from her important task. "It teaches them not to be afraid of a mess." He chuckled softly, his chin resting comfortably on my shoulder. "She's quoting you," he observed. "I know," I replied with a wry smile. "And it terrifies me." We were genuinely happy. It wasn't a perfect, flawless, fairy tale happiness. It was a happiness forged in the crucible of hard choices, resilience, and unwavering commitment. We carried our scars, visible and invisible. The news had been saturated with the coverage of the final verdict just the previous week. Dominic Moretti had been sentenced. It wasn't a 1 hour 28 minutes and 44 seconds dramatic courtroom showdown. It was a quiet, clinical legal proceeding. He was found guilty on 12 counts of wire fraud, data manipulation, and conspiracy to commit bribery. The judge, citing the overwhelming digital evidence and the damning testimony provided by Bianca, sentenced him to 20 years in a federal prison. He was an old man. It was, in effect, a life sentence. We had won. We had achieved victory without firing a single bullet or breaking a single law. We had dismantled a sprawling criminal empire using nothing but the power of truth. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of the battles we had fought. We were 1 hour 29 minutes and 19 seconds in the car a few nights ago, driving back from the symphony. Isla had drifted off to sleep in the back seat. I was resting my head comfortably on Mateo's shoulder. In the distance, a siren wailed, the mournful cry of an ambulance cutting through the stillness of the night. Mateo's entire body instantly went rigid. His hand, which had been resting gently on my leg, clenched into a tight fist. He wasn't in the car with me at that moment. He was transported back in time, back to that harrowing ambulance ride in the midst of the blinding snowstorm, 10 minutes too late. I didn't say anything. I simply covered his clenched fist with my own hand, carefully uncurling his fingers 1 hour 29 minutes and 54 seconds one by one and interlacing them with mine. I squeezed his hand tightly, offering silent reassurance. He took a sharp, shuddering breath, fighting to regain his composure. "I am here," he whispered, almost as if repeating a mantra to himself. "You are here," I whispered back, reinforcing the present moment. "We are here. It's just a siren, Mateo. It's just someone getting help. Help that will arrive on time." He squeezed my hand in return, his thumb gently rubbing over the surface of my wedding ring. He remained silent for a long time, lost in his thoughts. Love, I realized, isn't about magically erasing the scars of the past. It's about being the person who consistently holds the other person's hand, 1 hour 30 minutes and 32 seconds over and over, until the wave of panic subsides. It's a small, repeated, constant action, a daily commitment. Isla had been tasked with writing an essay for her school application. The prompt was deceptively simple. "What does home mean to you?" She had labored over it for 3 days, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. When she finally showed it to us, I had to excuse myself and go to the kitchen to cry tears of overwhelming joy and pride. Mateo simply sat in his office, reading it over and over, his face etched with emotion. It was only 4 sentences long. Home is not a place with glass walls. Home is not a place where you are quiet. Home is a kitchen. 1 hour 31 minutes and 10 seconds and home is a kitchen where someone waits for you to taste what they made. I framed it with care. It now hangs prominently in the real kitchen, the one in the penthouse. It hangs right next to her very first drawing of the 3 of us, a testament to our enduring bond. Our life wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, authentic, and filled with love. The world was still the world, with all its inherent complexities and challenges. The old forces that Mateo had once been entangled with, the ones that operated in the shadows and thrived on blood and violence, hadn't simply vanished because he had undergone a profound transformation. They were still out there, lurking, watching, and waiting. Mateo had received a cryptic text message just last night. It was sent from an 1 hour 31 minutes and 43 seconds unknown, encrypted number. He immediately showed it to me. It simply said, "You chose light. That's harder. They will be watching." We didn't know who they were. Was it a veiled threat? A cryptic warning from a former ally? It didn't ultimately matter. "Let them watch," I said, wrapping my arms tightly around his waist. "We're not hiding." "No," he said, pulling me close. "We're not." We had forged a new code of conduct, a new way of living. We had created a new family, bound by love and loyalty. We had built a thriving community, rooted in shared values. We were no longer afraid of the darkness because we were actively building a place filled with so much light. Tonight was Friday. Friday 1 hour 32 minutes and 20 seconds was designated as family night at the community kitchen. It was an open-door dinner for all the students, their families, and anyone in the neighborhood who was hungry or in need of companionship. The long, sturdy wooden tables in the church basement were laden with an abundance of delicious food. Lasagna, fresh salads, crusty garlic bread, and 24 meticulously crafted panna cottas, all lovingly made by Ella's little cooks. The room was buzzing with noise, chaotic, and filled with genuine laughter. I was seated at the head of the table, nestled comfortably between Isla and Mateo. I was deeply engrossed in a nerdy discussion with Ben, our invaluable data guy, about the merits of various new logistics software options. 1 hour 32 minutes and 53 seconds Ella was patiently explaining to a very short, inquisitive 5-year-old why tomatoes are, botanically speaking, classified as a fruit. I glanced down the length of the long table. I saw Alana, our fiercely intelligent lawyer, laughing and chatting animatedly with some of the mothers from the neighborhood. I saw Leo, our stoic and ever-vigilant guard, being challenged to an arm-wrestling match by a spirited 10-year-old. This was our new family, our chosen tribe. This was our new empire, built not on fear or control, but on compassion, connection, and shared purpose. It was built on panna cotta, on second chances, and on the unwavering belief in the power of community. Mateo must have sensed me watching him. He paused his conversation, turning his gaze to meet mine. 1 hour 33 minutes and 30 seconds, he didn't say a word. He simply smiled, a real, unguarded smile that, even after all this time, still had the power to make my heart skip a beat. He reached across the crowded table and took my hand in his. He gently brought my hand to his lips and kissed my knuckles, a small gesture of enduring love and appreciation. He had finally found his elusive 10 minutes, a moment of peace and clarity. We had all found our time, our place, our purpose. The obsessions, the ghosts of the past, the lingering trauma. They were all still present, lurking in the shadows, but they were quiet now, their voices muted. They were drowned out by the cheerful clatter of forks against plates, the comforting aroma of simmering tomato sauce, and the sound of his daughter's bright, beautiful, uninhibited laughter. True power, 1 hour 34 minutes and 6 seconds, I realized, isn't the ability to control every single aspect of your life or the lives of others. It's the wisdom to discern what is truly worth holding on to and the courage to release the rest. It's the ability to consciously choose not to wield power, even when you have the means to do so. Fairy tales and thriving cities are built one honest choice at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one shared meal at a time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm incredibly curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Please let me know in the comments so we can all connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia 1 hour 34 minutes and 38 seconds boss stories, and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. And please support the story by hitting that hype button so more people can get a chance to hear it.